Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, What's New in dotCMS 5.1, a look into our upcoming release. I'm Alexander Barcelona, Director of Marketing at dotCMS, and I'll be today's moderator. Before we get started, I'd like to go through a little bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to everyone who registered after the webinar. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end, so please be sure to submit any questions that you have in the panel on your screen. I'd like to give a brief overview of today's agenda. We'll be starting with introductions, then we'll go into how dotCMS 5.1 fits into the dotCMS roadmap. We'll take a deep dive into the new features of dotCMS 5.1, and then we'll finish with a Q&A session. So I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Stefan Schinkel, Enterprise Sales at dotCMS, and Will Ezell, CTO at dotCMS. Now I know we have a lot to get through today, so I will hand it over to you, Stefan.
Thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in today's webinar. We're excited to share with you a preview of dotCMS 5.1, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. But before we go into the details, first I'd like to start off with a short introduction, then go into the scope of 5.1. And then finally, we'll close out with what you can expect from dotCMS 5.2 and beyond. Now, you guys are all executing on your digital ambition, right? Whether it's optimizing your business or transforming or both. This is where you guys leverage technology like a CMS. And this is what we like to bring to the table, right? We really want to bring the content foundation as a service that allows you to build your enterprise-specific digital experience platform to deliver those connected, trusted, and continuous customer experiences. And we do that by delivering a cloud-ready, decoupled, and open framework and aiming at the highest level of no-code in the industry, right? So this is what we like to bring to the table. And we're delivering on our roadmap with 4 pillars, right? So overarching themes that I'd like to discuss with you one by one. So first, there's hybrid CMS, right? So dotCMS is a hybrid CMS, and hybrid actually means flexible, and that's with regards to content delivery, content publishing, as well as the actual deployment of the CMS, right? So we're developing and improving our product in this pillar as well to offer even more flexibility for you. Secondly, continuity, right? And continuity translates into a technical component, which is the platform continuity. Stuff like CI/CD, containerization, microservices, and serverless are the topics that we want to address there, right? And for the business teams, it's about experience continuity, right? So delivering those hyper-personalized customer experiences through the different channels that you manage based on data and allowing you to map those customer journeys. No code, super important pillar for us in our product, really making the marketing and business teams as self-sufficient as possible without engaging developers, and conversely, moving away from hardcore Java, but more to web developers and platform developers who can focus on innovation instead of being involved in the day-to-day operation of managing customer experiences. Lastly, intelligence. Our tool allows you to create, aggregate data on content, see what is resonating with your audiences, establish trends, and use that to optimize the experiences, right? So really get actionable insights so you can drive business outcomes, whatever they may be. Okay, so let's look into our upcoming release 5.1. So we're starting with some capabilities for business users. First one we'd like to highlight is the enhanced content type builder. It's an existing tools that's already out there in previous versions, but we made a next iteration, offered more flexibility, multi-column content forms for a better editor experience, and also adding field variables. Will, is there anything you would like to add to this?
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you everyone for joining us with our webinar of what's coming in dotCMS 5.1. We're going to start talking about some smaller niceties, but I think that are important nevertheless, and will really help everyone's experience with the tool and using the tool both from a developer's perspective and a business user's perspective. You know, what we've done in 5.1 is we've given the back end a slight stylistic refresh. There's crumb trails throughout the editing experience. It gives you context of where you are, what you're looking at. And we've also begun here with the content type builder to be able to allow users to navigate with a keyboard. And I think that this is an important place where we're going to be going with the UI more and more to add keyboard shortcuts to to the different elements of dotCMS. So you can see here I can type and it's gonna populate, and then I can navigate up and down without touching my mouse. I think that keyboard shortcuts are important from user experience. As Stefan mentioned, we've added the ability when designing your content types to create them as multi-column forms. So you can basically design the editing experience for your users that you'd like. So you can say, okay, for example, in this example, I have a movie type, and you can see I've decided to put it in a two-column order. And if you take a look at what that type looks like from an editor's perspective, you can see here it's a nice, clean two-column layout. So the column capability, the ability to add those columns, you can add tabs as well. But you can see here in the columns, you can make a 4-column, 3-column, 2-column, or 1-column design, and then drop your fields, drag your fields, and drop them right into that. And that's going to control what the editing experience looks like. Let me talk a little bit about the importance of field variables in dotCMS 5.1. The field level metadata was a capability that actually dotCMS had before the release of 5 that the new content type editor sort of hid. But in 5.1, we're going to begin to use this and leverage the field metadata in ways that I think are important to most of our users. So in this example and these examples, I just want to share with you what I've done. I've put together 3 different content types, which is a movie content type, a database of popular movies, studio, which is the studios those movies were made under, and the rating or the MPAA maturity level of those movies. And those types are interrelated within our system. But going back to field variables, the importance of field variables in 5.1 and where we're going to take the idea of the use of them is allow you to customize the behavior and look and feel of individual fields at the editor level. So if we take a look at the studio content editing form, we can see that multi-column form again, but this field here is actually the WYSIWYG field, but it's been configured using field variables to only display the text without any of the toolbars, without any of the sort of pieces around the normal WYSIWYG. It's been customized for this particular application. You can see it is a WYSIWYG. You can still use keyboard to bold and italicize and things like that. But it's controllable at a field level. So you can have a content type that has multiple WYSIWYGs, some large, some fully capable, others small. Using field variables, they can all be customized individually, right? And you can see what that looks like from a field variable level. If we take a look at the studio description here, field variable. You can see here, there's a key here, tinymce props. We use tinymce as our WYSIWYG, and you can customize each WYSIWYG within a particular content type. And you can even script within that so that you can say, if user has power user role, show them advanced formatting, show them the table editor, show them some of the other capabilities within tinymce. Otherwise, only show them a very simple WYSIWYG. So it's a capability. Everyone asks us how to customize the WYSIWYG in dotCMS, and it can now in the 5 series it can be done at a field by field level, which I think is an important new capability. And to end up here, I wanted to share with you one other thing that we're doing throughout the UI is we're exposing the API endpoints. So dotCMS, all of these capabilities in dotCMS are available via API to both set and get, and to use the content definitions that have been defined externally to the system. We're just exposing that, pushing that up to a level to make it very, very easy for developers to begin to engage with that. And with that, let me hand this back to Stefan, who can continue with the presentation.
Great, thanks, Will. Next one. We simplified and improved our content relationships, right? So it was already possible to build relationships, but we've run into some challenges as well, some of our customers. So we decided to do a complete overhaul and made the relationship actually part of the content type. There's a couple advantages to that that Will is going to dive into in a bit. First of all, it makes the relationships searchable, also allows for one-way relationships, and the relationships can also be exposed via the REST APIs. Will, can you tell us a bit more about relationships?
Sure, Stefan. So relationships in dotCMS have always been a very, very powerful capability of our content model. The only downside was that they were kind of clunky to use, kind of clunky to, both from the user perspective in relating content, clunky to create, and then clunky when you're developing with them to pull the related pieces of content. And they really lived outside of the content model itself. And so what we've done in 5.1 is we brought them into the content model and actually made relationships a field that you can add to a content type, right? And so by way of example, I've created in this demo instance 3 different content objects: one movie, a studio, and a rating, right? And they're pretty self-explanatory. Movie is, basically popular modern movie. A studio is the studios that produce those movies, and then a rating is really like the MPAA rating. Is it PG? Is it PG-13? Is it R? And this is kind of a real-world example from an implementation that we've seen. And in this example, I think one thing is important. Let's take a look at a movie here. If in dotCMS 5, what you would have to do is come over here to this relationship tab and kind of create a relationship outside of the piece of content. So to create a relationship now in 5.1, we have what's called a relationship field, right? And so this relationship field lets you create an actual field that's going to be displayed inline in the content, in the place where you're using that field, and allow you to map related content to it. So, for example, if we were to create a media relation, and we would say, okay, let's make this related to media, for example, and I can choose the cardinality of the relationship, whether it's required, and whether it's user searchable. So that's a new capability as well. Relationships now can be user searchable right from the UI. So if we take a look at the movie, the predefined movie that I have here, you can see here that I have the rating related to this movie type under a field called rating, and it's user searchable, right? And so what that means now is that when I come to our movie content type, right? So let me come to our movie content type. I can now filter the movie listings based upon the relationship of, okay, I want to see all of the PG-13 movies, right? Or I want to see the same thing with studio. So if I take a look at a piece of content, you can see here, there's a rating here. There's the media relationship that I just added. Down here is the studio. And going back to our content search screen, I can say, okay, let me close that. I can say, give me the PG-13 movies that were put out by Universal, right? And it's going to build that list, and that list is being driven by Elasticsearch. Is very performant, and all of those different query combinations are, as you can see, and let me pull this up. For those of you who have been dotCMS users for a long time, you can see here that searching a rating, the rating field, is just like searching any other field in dotCMS. This would be the identifier of the related rating, and the same thing with studio. This is the identifier of the related studio. So it makes generating the queries to pull related content very, very simple as well, right? Now, another interesting benefit of the rating of the relationships as field is you can have a relationship that's only visible on one side of the relationship. So, for example, if we take a look at the X-Men Days of Future Past, it here you can see is PG-13 movie. This is really, in essence, being used as like a category. And if I click into the PG-13 rating piece of content, now what we're looking at here is the rating piece of content. You can see here, here's the information and metadata surrounding the rating, the graphic, but nowhere on this screen am I seeing automatically a list of all the pieces of content that have been related to this particular rating, right? And that's a real huge benefit. So what that means is you can use relationships very much like you could like in categories, and you can have a piece of content that has 50,000 other pieces of content related to it, and that's still going to be manageable within the UI. It's still going to give you kind of a user experience that's going to be okay, because you're not going to it's not going to be visible to you in the UI. It can only be visible on the one side of the relationship, right? And you can navigate back. The system's smart enough now to allow you to navigate back to your original piece of content that you were looking at. Right? And finally, the whole idea of these relationships at the field level has been carried through even to the API. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So if we come back to our movie type, and let's take a look at the X-Men movie again and take a look at the API, is I can pass a depth parameter, right? And I can say depth equals, let's say, 1. And when I say depth equals 1, what it's going to give me, it's going to give me the related content to the depth of 1. So this content here that we're looking at, X-Men Days of Future Past, has a relationship of a rating, right? And this rating is coming back as a JSON object, right? Because this is it can only have one rating, but it's also coming back with the studios. And here the studio is coming back as a list in JSON, because you can have multiple studios that produced a single movie. So it's an important, all of the relationship data now is available to you wherever you can pull content in the system. It's available to you in Velocity. It's available to you in all the APIs just by passing the depth, right? So I can say depth 2, and it's going to go 2 levels deeper now, right? But it's only going to follow the relationships that have fields specified. So it's not going to follow, if you have a relationship only defined on a single side, it's not going to follow both sides of that relationship with the depth. Depth can only go up to 3. Beyond that, you run the risk of pulling back the whole graph of content in dotCMS, which can get pretty heavy. But this is all cached and performant, just like everything in dotCMS. We care very much about the performance of our APIs and making sure that this is not inducing database hits, unnecessarily, and really can be used out of the box in a production environment. And let me hand this back to you, Stefan. That's the work we've been doing on relationships, and we'll show here how those are being used in the system when we start talking about some of the API work that we've done.
Great. Thanks, Will. The next one, and this I would say is the biggest capability that we want to bring in this. Well, it's only a minor release, and we're pretty excited about this. It's basically we call it Edit Mode Anywhere, and that references the front end technology that you might use to render the content. With this capability, you can deploy dotCMS headless and still have access to super important tools like preview, inline editing, and drag and drop, right? So whether you are feeding an Angular, React, or Node.js or Vue app, or even some more legacy apps built in ASP.NET or PHP, it's irrelevant. Edit Mode Anywhere really helps business users to do what they want to do, create great experiences without having a disrupted editor experience themselves, right? So this really ties into the no-code philosophy, but also adds to the continuity and the hybrid CMS. Will, can you show us how this looks like?
Sure, Stefan. Edit Mode Anywhere, I agree, is a really exciting capability in dotCMS 5.1. I have up here the diagram of how Edit Mode Anywhere works. It's not the prettiest diagram, but it is descriptive. And thing about diagrams, they work for the person who creates them, so that's what this is. But let me talk about it a little bit here. Edit Mode Anywhere really builds on the work we did with Page as a Service and Layout as a Service in dotCMS 4.3 and 5.0. Those are very capable services. What we did, we took the Page as a Service endpoint and kept adding to it, and in essence added to it all really that a remote system that's consuming a Page as a Service would need, not only to render the page, but also to be able to render back into dotCMS what that page would look like if dotCMS were to consume it in edit mode. So what that means, in essence, is that with Edit Mode Anywhere, what you can have is a fully manageable single-page app that lives completely separately outside of dotCMS. It could be a single-page app. It could be, as Stefan said, a .NET app, a PHP-based or a Node-based server, anything that can consume the Page as a Service API and can render that back, and dotCMS can take that render and will drop that into edit mode and make that manageable. But so I think the best way for me to start is just to basically demonstrate it, right? And so what we've done, and in 5.1, is we've delivered a single-page app that's written in React and written on top of our demo.dotcms.com site, which is not a requirement, it's just an example. And so with that, for this demonstration, we hooked that into Heroku and have gone ahead and deployed it via Heroku. It's listening to a Git branch, and whenever updates happen, it redeploys. The important thing about this app is that it is a universal or isomorphic single-page app, and what that means is it means that it can render both client-side completely using the browser's JavaScript, or it can render server-side, and actually Node can go and make the requests under the covers and deliver the pre-rendered HTML back. And this single-page app supports both of those. And so we went ahead and deployed it on Heroku. And what that gives us on Heroku is a single-page app running against we also have a server set up for this webinar called webinar.dotcms.com. And so the content, the layout, the pages in this webinar.dotcms.com is feeding all of the content, layout, and pages in this single-page app. So the single-page app has a lot of different capabilities in it. Number one challenge that I think people struggle with when integrating CMSs with their single-page app strategies is how do you deal with routes, right? Single-page apps are all about There are no pages, instead they're routes, and the routes are what content hangs on. In dotCMS, we offer Navigation as a Service API that actually drives the navigation up here for the single page app. And just to show you all, let me show you all the page source here. You can see here that that page source is, obviously all of the interactions here are happening on the client side. We also, the single page app can support things like slug, URL-based slugs. Again, this is pulling from the news repository in the dotCMS starter site. Now let's head on over to dotCMS and take a look at what it looks like on that side. Okay, as you can see, we're now at webinar.dotcms.com, which is driving the content on the single page app running on Roku. And if I click into, let me just click into edit a page and jump to edit mode, you can see here that this page is actually the single page app coming through in edit mode, right? And I can browse the site in edit mode, and if I take a look at a particular page, you can see here that I have my normal editing capabilities within dotCMS. And so what does that mean? It means we can edit content contextually. Contextual, right? And I can save that. And you can see here that content's been updated. I can preview what that's going to look like, and I can preview that, in a variety of different devices. I can preview what the single page app is going to look like in a variety of different devices. And I can also do things like drag and drop content and content layouts. Let me just show you all. You can drag and drop content, and let me drop the event up there, and I can rearrange my page however I see fit. Right now, the beauty of this is when I hit save and publish, and I come back to my single page app. Let's take a look at the About Us page now, and you can see all of my changes have now taken place and are visible in my single page app, right? And so the single page, again, this is single page app is all happening via API, via client-side rendering, and I was able to jump in and just edit that just like I would any other page or any other site that's being delivered by dotCMS. But there's even more capability. So in dotCMS and edit mode, you can edit layouts, for example, right? So I could say that I want this page in particular to use a 50-50 layout. And I come back to our React app and refresh. You can see now my layouts being managed within dotCMS. I can do things like choose to change if you had multiple themes. You could change the theme of your single page app, or I can choose to hide the header and footer of our single page app. And if I come back and refresh here, okay, so I lost my header. So with this capability, you can deliver more than pages. You can deliver layouts into third-party systems. So let's say you have an e-commerce site and you want to, in between the rows of products, you want to drop in a perfectly laid out promotion for a number of different products. You can lay that out within dotCMS and then consume that and be able to deliver that in a single page app experience within your e-commerce application. And the good news is it's all configurable and controllable from the dotCMS, the edit mode of the dotCMS system. So what it comes down to is there's really not a capability in dotCMS edit mode that can't be leveraged within a single page app and within the single page app edit mode anywhere framework that we've developed, right? You can do things like, let's say I want to add a new YouTube video, right? And I'm going to say, okay, YouTube video, and I'm going to search for my favorite YouTube videos of all times, which are cat videos, and I'm going to go ahead and save and publish those, or this video. And now when I come back to my single page app, you can see that the cat videos on my single page app, and I can reorder and drag and drop anything that could be done within edit mode, right? So when I come back to my single page app, there's my cat video. Moving on, let me show a little bit about how single page apps, how you can add new pages to single page apps. And again, in this paradigm, and this doesn't have to be the case, but in this paradigm, a page equals a route within the single page app. So we say my node page, we give it a URL, and we choose we pick a template here within the system, and let's go ahead and say one column, and we're going to save and publish. Okay, so now we're looking at a blank page on the single page app. Well, what I'd like to do actually is I'd like to choose to show this page on menu. I don't want to cache it. I'd like to choose to show this page on menu and go ahead and add that property there and then begin to manage my content on the page. So I can say, okay, this page is going to have, again, is going to be, maybe it's a 3-column layout. And I can choose in each area what content can be added to that area. And then maybe I want to add at the top a banner, right? So I can say, let's put a banner at the top and drag that up at the top and go ahead and save that. And coming back to my page, so these are now my layout of my template. So I can say, let's say I want to select a new banner, right? And one thing we've done in 5.1 is we give an image, a preview of what the content type can look like. And here you can see we can drop a banner, let's say the first-time investor, okay? And that's going to go ahead and drop that onto the page, and I can begin to populate the content under it, and I can reuse content. I can drop content onto it. I can say, okay, let's drop all different kinds of content. And this content, again, is all manageable. Let's say the technological job fair, okay? So, really I've just created a page. I can go ahead and publish this page. And now when I come over to my single page app and I hit refresh, you can see here I have a new route called my node page, right? And again, this is all client side, what's happening here. And that instantly is available to any remote system that is using dotCMS to drive the page and context of their application. And let's say I wanted to, continue down this path, and I can reorder my menu, and I want to put services first and about a second, and my node page at the top, and I can go ahead and save those changes. And my menu and the navigation is refreshed on my page. It's also refreshed on my single page app. So I've come to realize how deep and powerful this capability Edit Mode Anywhere is for our system. There's a lot of components to it, and it requires some understanding of how some of the different pieces in dotCMS work. But to enable it really takes the single page app, which we're going to be offering in 5.1. There's an OSGI-based plugin, which we're going to be offering in 5.1 that can do the delivery of the Edit Mode Anywhere. And finally, obviously dotCMS 5.1. And with those three pieces, you can deliver content completely remotely and get that rendered in any third-party system and still deliver a very, very robust and business-friendly editing experience for your CMS users. So we're real excited about this. I could go on and on about it, but I'm going to hand it back to you, Stefan. Thanks.
Now, moving on to the IT stakeholders, one of the tools that we're also pretty excited about is the new APIs tools that allow you to build REST endpoints without a single line of Java coding. First, we're going to talk about the Scriptable API Builder, but also scripting as a service. Well, can you shed some light on this new capability?
Sure, Stefan. We are very excited about the Scriptable API Builders and scripting as a service. These are two really what I'd consider hybrid capabilities that we're able to do within dotCMS because we offer a scripting language on top of the content repository. And that scripting language over the years has been tuned and is really highly performant and can deliver content at a really high rate. So using that same technology, we can allow our users to build really custom REST endpoints that access the dotCMS content repository and information within the dotCMS in custom ways that contain custom logic without touching a line of Java code. That really pushes the level of expertise needed to build a REST endpoint up to, let's say, a front-end developer, a web developer can come in and develop their own endpoints and be comfortable knowing that that's going to be backed by the performance of the dotCMS's front-end delivery tier. So let's dive right in here. Well, what we've done with the scriptable REST endpoint is allowed you to call velocity scripting via a REST API. So we've hooked it up to a JAX-RS endpoint. What that allows you to do is to call velocity, what we call VTL files, scripting files that live under this API VTL folder, and you can pass them parameters, you can pass them a JSON body, you can pass them, they have full access to the request and the response and the session. They can be authenticated, and authentication is, and the permissions of them are based upon the permissions of the files that are under that folder. But the beauty of it is that these VTL files can live outside of dotCMS. They can be versioned outside of dotCMS. And each of these files are responsible for the HTTP method which they're named for. So HTTP GET is going to call the GET VTL, which is going to generate the response for a GET call. HTTP POST is going to be responded to by the POST VTL. And that way, the logic of each of the different HTTP actions can be separated out into different files. Going back to our example, I have the movies example, right? So we looked at some of these movies, X-Men or Angels and Demons, some of these. But coming here to this API VTL folder, let's say I wanted to create a custom endpoint for those movies. Let's say I wanted to not only pull, not only do we want to pull this content, but maybe we want to format it in a particular way. Maybe we want to provide a particular query that can be passed in to query the content repository. So we do have our content APIs, and those aren't going away, but this provides just a lot of flexibility when you want to define what dotCMS is going to send back to you based upon either logic or parameters passed in, what have you. So let's take a look at the VTL files, the velocity of the script that is needed to generate responses. So we'll first take a look at the GET VTL. And if you're familiar with velocity, this is going to look very familiar to you. I'll walk through it a little bit step by step. But what this is doing is the script is checking to see whether we have a path param, right? And that would be a parameter in the URI. And if we do, let's say it would be the ID of the movie, then what we're going to do is find that particular movie by ID. Otherwise, what we're going to do is do a content pull and pull the, let me zoom this in, and pull the list of movies, the top 10 movies ordered by title. Then what we're going to do in Velocity, we're going to create an array, and we're going to loop over each movie in the movie list, and then we're going to create a map, a Java map. This is a map that we can just put values into, and we're going to put the values that we want into that map. So, for example, we put the identifier of the movie, the title, the year, the poster image. So the movies have a related poster, this poster here, and what we're doing is we're pulling that poster image and we're getting the URL for that poster image. So that's what we want in order to, so we can reference the poster. We're also pulling the rating, and this is interesting because if we go back and take a look at the movie again, this rating is a new relationship, a relationship field. And you can see here, we can just, within our scripting language, use dot notation to pull the movie, the rating, and then the rating title for that movie. Here, we can pull the genre, and that is not how you spell genre. And here, we can pull the Rotten Tomatoes. And then another thing, we can pull the studios. And again, this is a relationship field. What this relationship field is a list. Now, the rating relationship is a single entity. You can only have a single rating per movie, but you can have multiple studios on a given movie. And so what we return there when you call movie studio is a list. So we build a list and we put that into our map. We add that to this result list. And then what we do, and this is, I think, the interesting part, is we have a .json object, right? This .json object is a special object for these VTLs. You can populate that. Then when the API is called, that's what's going to be rendered. And so what we're doing is we're putting the movie list into our result list here. We also have this value. I think this is a really interesting value. You have the ability to cache the response to set the cache for the response within the code. So if you set a value for .cache for 10 seconds, this response is going to be cached for 10 seconds, and that makes calling that API super performant. So let me go ahead and drag new API into the API VTL folder. So I'm going to drag all of these up here, and you can see here that the web dev is going to automatically drop those into dotCMS. And if we come back to dotCMS now, we can see that these files are available, right? So let's take a look, and here's the get file we were just looking at. And now to call this API, let's take a look at what it looks like. Let's open a new browser, and it's movies. And this is a convention-based. It's the name of the folder that this VTL is under. And this is going to be a HTTP GET call. And so what it's going to return to me here is the response of the GET VTL in perfectly formed JSON, right? And you can go down and see that we have our identifier, we have our title, we have our URL for the poster image, right? And so if I hit this poster image, it's going to give us that URL, or it's going to give us that image. The tags here, the Rotten Tomatoes score, and then the studio. Or if I want to pull just a single movie, we can say, okay, let's pass the ID, and it's going to pull a single movie. And what that's doing, that's falling into this if set path param, and then just pulling the single movie, right? So the .json is in charge. This object here, again, if it's populated, it's going to return a JSON response back to you, completely well formatted. It's not going to care about any of the white spacing or formatting issues within the velocity itself. So it's a nice benefit. You can just put stuff into the .json map and in your VTL and know that that's going to come back as JSON when that's hit. Let's go on and take a look at some of these other VTLs. So for example, this put VTL here is a little bit different than the get VTL. What this is doing is it's not using the .json object, and instead is able to just spit out a raw response. And you can see here that this response is going to be XML, and it's going to spit back the method name because we have a handle on the request. It's going to spit back the path parameter that I use in the URL, and it's going to spit back this body map, which is a JSON body that's going to be included in the put, and any query parameters that are included in the URL. So let me show you what this looks like, and I'm old school. I'm going to use curl here instead of Postman or something more modern. But let me just cut and paste this curl command. Okay, you can see here that we're doing a put to the movies, and we're saying that this is a query param, and here's my key. We're passing in a JSON object, and we go ahead and we can get back our XML here. You can spit back out raw velocity. It doesn't have to be JSON. The JSON object makes it very easy to compose a valid JSON response. So finally, let's take a look at the post VTL, the code in this endpoint. This is going to accept a post, and I think this is the most interesting example and highlights a new feature in dotCMS 5.1. You can see here what we're doing is we're taking this body map, and this is the JSON that's getting posted in to the endpoint, and pushing that through a workflow process. In essence, checking in that JSON as a piece of content into the content repository. And this workflow ID here is the publish action, so that's going to go ahead and publish that particular piece of content. How do you use this? How would you use this endpoint? you take a look at this curl example. So we're curling, we're posting into the movies endpoint, and we specify all the properties that make up a movie content object. Important note, this endpoint supports multi-part processing. So if you want to push a file into a binary asset into the dotCMS repo, you can build that with this. I don't have that example here, but I think that that's a really important capability as well, right? So release date and studio, and this studio is a relationship. And so what we're saying here is relate this movie to any studio that has a name with dotCMS.star, right? And so if I take this and go ahead and post that into dotCMS, you can see what comes back. It spits back out the saved content object. And if I come back to our content repo, you can see here, now I have a new piece of content, and it's the dotCMS Thriller release with the tags, the poster image, and the studio that I specified in my query. Finally, let me share what I think is a very interesting feature of the scripting API is the ability for it to render scripts dynamically. And so this is a permission-based, you need to have a particular role within the CMS to be able to utilize this. What this allows you to do is to put or post basically the contents of a script into dotCMS dynamically and have that render out and come back as rendered in whatever format you want to see that come back as. So, you know, as a simple example here, our script is we set our date to my date, and then we say, hello, my date. And if I submit that, you can see here, that's going to come back just raw, rendered, hello, today is February 13th. You can see here that's just spitting back that raw velocity script. You can also use some of the features that are available in the scripting API. So the .json object, if you want to spit back well-formatted JSON, we can go ahead and paste that, and it's going to come back and spit back JSON object properly formatted. And finally, for the most mind-bending example here, I think, is what we're going to be doing is posting in a JSON object that also includes the velocity script to execute with that object. So this, again, is the movie example. We're doing dotCMS extra dynamic. And if we go ahead and take this, what's going to happen is this JSON object is going to be passed into this workflow tool as the body map, and again, will be checked into the content repo. So let me go ahead and show what that looks like. And now if we come back to our content repo, you can see here, we checked in a piece of content. Now, why is this an important capability? Well, it allows scripts to be defined externally from dotCMS. Number one, it also allows scripts to be determined at runtime. So, you know, applications elsewhere can post into dotCMS, and dotCMS is going to take that and render that and return back, you know, exactly what that application needs at that particular time. So it's just a very intriguing and powerful capability within the system itself. And with that, let me hand it back to Stefan.
Great. Next one, file-based click container. Containers basically allows you to build containers, content containers, and the specific templates offline as files, and then upload them into dotCMS, and obviously also in batch. And again, that's another step to separate code from content. Will, can you share with us how this will help both business and IT?
Absolutely, Stefan. File-based containers are an important step in beginning to really separate the idea of code and configuration from content within the dotCMS system. Code and configuration follows a very particular development process and workflow, and content within the system can follow a similar workflow, but also can come in from other environments and also can come in via API and can come in actually from production. A lot of times you want to mirror your production content back to your dev environment so you have good data in order to do QA and testing. Containers, in my mind, represent one of the older components in dotCMS and are very tightly coupled with dotCMS database. And you can see here that each of these templates here, while they can be externalized within, using an include here, they still require database entries in order for those to work. What containers as files shows is where we're going as a product and how things are going to be pulled out of the database and be externally versionable, externally manageable, and be able to be promoted through environments through a CI/CD process. So what containers as files do is take all of these different templates that are now embedded into dotCMS and externalize them into files, right? So you can see here that I have this folder called demo container and has the templates for the different content types that are going to be rendered within that container. Now it's convention based and those names are the content types variable names. So just like containers have properties, things like you can have define in a container how many content objects it can hold, and there's a pre-loop and a post-loop. If we go back and look at our files, and let's take a look at the container file, and you can see here that the container file is using this .json object again and is leveraging that to set the title, to set the contentlets, to set even the container notes for the particular container, right? The pre-loop and post-loop, again, live separately and are versionable as files, and each of these different container blocks are sort of micro templates for the content within the container live on as their own files as well. In order to put those and use those in dotCMS, you have to upload those into a convention-based folder under, in this case, it's called application containers, right? And if I drag this demo container into my dotCMS system, and then come back and take a look at our browser here, you can see now I have the demo container and all the different components that are in it, right? And if I come to my container listing here you can see also that it's registered as a container within the system itself. I can take this particular path here, and let's show you how I want to use this. If I come to a template, let's do an advanced template, which is my template. Adding a container in dotCMS, the way you add it, you can click on that, or you can call the include itself. But I can search here for our demo container. Go ahead and add it. Now you can see here this inserted an identifier which is tying us to the database. If I want, I can containers and demo container. I can reference the container by its path. So if we have a container called demo container, right, I can reference it that way. And so what that's going to do now, when I create a page that uses my template, let me create a new page here to use and I'm going to use my template here. Come to edit, you can see here that it's going to act just like any other container in dotCMS, and it's going to have predefined content types that it's going to respect, and that's based upon the list of the content objects or the VTL files that are in that particular folder for the container. Now, containers also can be referenced, just like I referenced it by the path. Containers can also be referenced across hosts. So if we use the syntax in our template, parse container, and we did to.com, which is going to be our demo host, then it's going to parse that across hosts. This container can then be reusable across hosts, and we'll call the right demo container on the right particular host. So containers being defined on the file system is the first step to a longer process of extracting configuration and code out of dotCMS and moving that into a being able to move that into a externally versionable repo and being able to deliver that into multiple environments. So this is going to be continuing in future releases, and we look forward to all the opportunities and advantages that this is going to bring. Stefan?
Great. Yeah, this is actually we're super excited about this new capability. We with 5.1 we offer native GraphQL support, which is a pretty cool technology in our stack. So we support the GraphQL API as well the GraphQL query language. Will, can you talk a little bit more about GraphQL and how technology teams can leverage this going forward?
Absolutely. So just quickly, the importance of GraphQL. This is old news to some of you and interesting to others. The GraphQL is a specification that really has a lot of benefits over the traditional, and I say traditional, we're talking 8-9 years ago, but the traditional REST API JSON endpoints. There's a lot of benefits include the fact that it's as an endpoint, it's self-documenting. So documenting JSON, and there's all kinds of technologies that have been built around just the fact of documenting JSON and JSON endpoints. GraphQL has the benefit of being self-documenting, which means you can query the GraphQL endpoint and it can tell you what it's capable of doing. The other feature in GraphQL that's extremely important is that it allows you not to overfetch. So when you call the dotCMS API, a lot of times you get back a lot more than you bargained for, and a lot of sort of metadata around the content when you're really just looking for the title, the image, and the body. In GraphQL, you get to specify exactly what you want to get back from the client side at runtime. And in dotCMS, what we're doing is we're basically mapping our content types, our base types, to a GraphQL interface. And what that means, it means you can query all file assets regardless of their base type together as a collection. Same thing with content or personas or HTML pages. And then each content type itself becomes a collection so that you can query each particular content type as a collection. And finally, you can just perform a query across the entire content repository, just like you can with Elasticsearch-based querying. So dotCMS generates the schema, the GraphQL schema on the fly when content types are modified. And like all things in dotCMS, it doesn't take a lick of Java coding in order to generate the schema. The dotCMS takes care of that for you automatically based upon the definition of the content types. Once your types are modified, GraphQL rebuilds the schema and allows people to query based upon the new properties that are found. It's a very important, I think GraphQL is a very important direction for the future of dotCMS APIs and is going to become more and more important. At this time in 5.1, we really only support querying the content repository using GraphQL, and we in the future will begin to explore allowing to do what are called mutations, which is allowing content to be modified using GraphQL, being able to do updates or deletes on content objects, and even potentially using GraphQL to define the entire content schema. There's a lot we can do with GraphQL in a lot of directions, and we can expose, through GraphQL, we can expose all different facets of our system as queryable endpoints through a single interface. It's an exciting technology. Whole companies are being built around it and being driven by it, and our content repository really lends itself, the complete separation of content from the presentation of that content, it really lends itself to acting as a full content repo accessible by GraphQL. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk through connecting to dotCMS GraphQL endpoint. The first thing we need to do in order to do that is we need an access token. So let me request an access token from my local dotCMS, and this is passing in my username and password and saying I want this token to expire in 1,000 days. And I'll take that access token, and we will say this is a new request, and We'll say that our auth is going to be the bearer token, which is what the JOT access token is, and we save that. And then we have to put in our endpoint, and the endpoint for GraphQL is API v1 GraphQL. And then we'll select here that we want to do a GraphQL query, right? And so the first thing that this will do right out of the box is, based on that endpoint, we'll go ahead and fetch the GraphQL schema. And this is what I was talking about GraphQL being self-documenting. So what that means is now this tool can start doing autocomplete, right? So for example, I can start typing my query, and let's say I want to query news articles in dotCMS, right? I can say, okay, I'm going to query the news collection. Every content type has a quote-unquote collection, which is going to have all of the content of its type, and I can query the news content type. So I can say, okay, I want where title is like gas star. And these queries here, this is just an Elasticsearch Lucene query. So the same queries that you use to drive your queries on the front end or even via APIs, this GraphQL will accept the same exact query language there, right? So it makes it very easy to translate your queries from one API endpoint or from Velocity to GraphQL. I can also say I only want, let's say I want a limit of 10, and let's say we want to sort by mod date. So then what I can do here, and what this is going to do for me, because we have the schema, it's going to allow me to select from the fields that I want to return. So let's say I want to return we'll return the title, we'll return the byline, and we'll return the lead, right? And so if I send that query off, you can see here that this is going to return exactly what I asked for. It's going to return the title, the byline, the lead of the news content type. Now, the beauty of GraphQL is you can begin to query other objects within the repository. So for example, this host folder field here, this field here has multiple properties, right? It has a folder path. We can have the host name, host aliases. We can get back just about anything, any property that's available for that host folder field. And likewise, if we say image, so this is querying on a news article, and image is a binary field, we can get the path, we can also get the name, and let's get the size. All right, and so we send that off, and you can see here now I have a nested graph of our content. Right, so let's explore how some of these other fields, because the thing about GraphQL is each field on a particular content type or content object can return not only just a single value, but can return a set of values. And in the case, for example, of relationships, can return an entire collection of the related content, or you can go down the graph of relationships using GraphQL. But I want to show, we talked a little bit about the host folder and this image, the binary field here, but for example, categories. So categories, you can retrieve this is a news article, you can retrieve the inode of the category, you can retrieve the name and the velocity variable of any given category, right? So if you send that, you can see here that this, BlackBerry Goes cross-platform has been categorized under research, right? Or tags, you can get back tags, and tags is going to return to you a list of how the piece of content has been tagged. Each of the different fields within a piece of content can return different properties. A folder, for example, is going to have a path, and you can get back basically all the different properties on a given folder in dotCMS. So you can get the folder title or the name or what have you. You can also do a broader query. So let's say you wanted to do, I guess, what we call a join, right? What you can do is you can say, I want to query content types, news, and employee, right? And for both of them, I want to pull the title and identifier. And for if it's a news article, I want to pull the URL and the byline. Otherwise, let's just do the byline actually. And otherwise, if it's an employee, I want the first name and the last name, right? So if I send that query off, you can see here what it's doing. It's doing a join. It's pulling all the news content, all the employee content, and then based upon what the piece of content is, it's going to return the fields on that piece of content. So you can query multiple types of content within a single query, and for each of them, pull back the fields and the properties that you want to see for that given piece of content. And that about wraps it up with what we have to show today on GraphQL. But we're real excited about it in 5.1, and it's only going to improve on an ongoing basis throughout the releases. But it is really quite powerful and performant even today on its an initial iteration. Stefan?
Fantastic. Obviously, there's the occasional maintenance also in this release. So we updated the UI stack to Angular 7, bring that part of our stack up to par. And for Elasticsearch, we made some changes that really helped the indexing. Will, can you talk a little bit more about the Elasticsearch and Angular update?
Sure, Stefan. We started the journey with Angular 2 back in 2015, 16 when we were rebuilding the rules engine in dotCMS, and since then we've gone from 2 to 4, and with this release we'll be upgrading to 7. So Angular's moving fast. We're keeping up with it. I think that's an important component to what we're doing here with the tool. We've also, one piece that we did do is we upgraded the rules engine portlet to Angular 7 and brought the widgets in line with the widget tool set that we're using within the rest of the tool. So that's a nice freshening up and modernization. And the Elasticsearch content reindexing changes, these are under the covers, but they're important. They allow you to, when you're checking in a content, to determine when you want that content to be sent to Elasticsearch. So you can have that content sent to Elasticsearch immediately, which is sort of a stop the world operation, and Elasticsearch will reindex it and return, the ACK saying that it's okay, it's reindexed. You can tell it to wait for Elasticsearch to reindex it on its own time. That's generally a refresh of a second or two, depending on how big your Elasticsearch cluster is. Or you could defer it and just have Elasticsearch, just kind of throw it at Elasticsearch and know that, it'll be reindexed in the future, but you're not going to wait for it. And that allows you really fine-grained control of when you're checking in content in the repo, whether you want to wait for Elasticsearch or not. And that's obviously a very important component for our software and its position in the marketplace.
Perfect. Also, some security fixes in this release. You see them here on our screen. We'll obviously also share them in our release notes. And as we move forward, we're pretty keen on security fixes. As you guys build business critical applications, and you want to rely on the underlying software that offers you a secure experience. Will, is there anything you want to add to these fixes?
Sure. As Stefan was saying, the security is utmost important to us as a product. The companies and institutions worldwide that rely on dotCMS are growing and are, really as big as they can be. And its security is a really, really high priority for us. So we work with a number of different security researchers doing vulnerability assessments and whatnot. And when issues are found, we address them as quickly as possible. 5.1 has a number of these fixed, and for users that are on older versions, I would suggest reaching out to support and seeing whether or not there's hot fixes available for you for those fixes. But it's a really critical component, and every version of dotCMS gets more secure.
Perfect. Okay, the final slide. We also made a number of smaller improvements. First is the velocity errors that are currently being exposed through system notifications in a separate window. The API response is richer, includes more properties, obviously super important in a headless operation. And we also have content workflow in Velocity. Will, can you explain a little bit more in detail about these smaller improvements, please?
Yeah, and these are smaller improvements. One thing when we moved to the new edit mode, one thing that we lost a bit of was the ability to report velocity errors to people designing pages and templates and containers and whatnot, and report that through the UI. That's now bubbling up using system notifications. And then the second bullet point with our API responses, we're just standardizing the format of our API responses and putting in good work to make those responses, both the values that are coming back and the error messages coming back, making those useful and standardized across, have standard meaning across dotCMS. That's, as Stefan mentioned, that's a very important component in the headless space. And finally, the content workflow in Velocity, that's what I demonstrated in the Scriptable API, where I was demonstrating how to check in content from Velocity. It's a really nice feature, something that's been missing from the system for years, but I think that the ability to check in content velocity is something that a lot of people will use in order to populate and push content through workflows. And that's obviously a very important component for our software and its position in the marketplace.
Thank you both so much for your insight into dotCMS 5.1. We went through a lot of features and functionality, and we are cutting it pretty close on the time. So if you do have some extra time, please do stick around for our Q&A session. If not, remember, we are recording today's webinar, and we will be sending that out to everyone who registered. So with that, I will pass it back to you, Stefan and Will, and we can go through some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, that was definitely a long session for just a minor release, right? So yeah, let's open up for some questions. Let me make it a little bit bigger because I can hardly read it. We have a couple of questions coming in. Can you bring a little bit more specific on standardization of responses with an example?
Yeah, in our code base, guys, we've standardized with at least with the JAX-RX endpoints. We have a standard object that we return, and you've seen it if you've used like the pages of service or whatnot that has the response. It has any response errors that are coming in, and basically that return is going to wrap all of our API responses. And additionally, we've done work making sure that, like, for example, when if you call an object by ID, you get and that ID doesn't exist, you get a 404. It's an ongoing process. I mean, we have a lot of endpoints that we're rolling that out to, but that's the type of work that there's a number of cases of that in 5.1.
Cool. Are you planning on making tags as content as well?
We are not, though. I don't know. You could, though, with the new relationship field, it would be very possible to use it in that manner, to be able to do that. There wasn't an initial. There's categories I think would be lend themselves more to content than tags, but it's an interesting idea. Yeah, not currently, but you could do it within an implementation.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the exact date and time for 5.1.
The exact date and time we're targeting early to mid March currently for 5.1.
Yeah.
So we're right now in the process of fixing bugs. We're not really adding any features, so we're going to go through a cycle of QA, and then we're going to put it out there.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting to see. So yeah, just a couple of more weeks, guys, and then we should bring this release to the market. Yeah, we didn't get to, and I think we're going to wrap up because most of the questions have been answered already. We didn't get to 5.2. That was the original plan, but we felt like spending all the time on 5.1 because, as you noticed, there was a lot to show that we wanted to share. But we will definitely communicate on what we're planning in 5.2. So 5.2 is slated for Q3 this year. So that's still a little bit out, but we are definitely already looking into that and what we would like to bring into that release. So stay tuned, I would say. And yeah, let's get excited about 5.1 and let's start using it. Yeah, for now, I would like to thank you, Alex, Will, as always. Pleasure. Thank you for sharing all the great stuff on 5.1. And yeah, let's leave it here.
Well, thank you, Stefan, and thank you, everyone, for sitting through that. And that was longer than we anticipated, but there was a lot to see, so we appreciate the attention. So thank you all, and that's the wrap.
Have a great day. Take care.